Because I asked him, why do these plants gift us mystical experiences? There's no evolutionary reason for this. I've been, just fascinated by that. And he told me, because the plants want to know what it feels like to be humans. People at work saying like, you seem different. I obviously couldn't tell them I smoked toad venom on Sunday, so maybe that's why. You waxing, someone who just has read about consciousness, death, the afterlife, their understanding of altered states of consciousness, of mystical experiences, tantamount to my experience of what it's like to give birth. These experiences have just, changed my life, and also obviously helped me in just unbelievably powerful ways heal from two profound losses.
Welcome to Beyond the Veil, stories of twin flames, divine union, and mystical encounters. Sit back, relax, and listen to your story today. Our next guest is Andrew, and he is the author of the Psychedelic blog on Substack, and I highly recommend you check it out. He's such a prolific writer, and it has a lot of amazing insights. And he's here to tell us a couple stories today that he's going to weave together. Hi, Andrew.
Hey, Kimber. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you
and
so
I appreciate,
much.
Appreciate the kind words as well about the blog.
Yeah, so I'm a regular reader, so yeah, if you guys are interested, it's great. Thank you so much, and go ahead and tell us your story.
All right, great. So in terms of my background, I'm based here in Austin, Texas, formerly of Los Angeles. I miss LA. And I started writing about my experiences with psychedelics and then just generally about the impact of psychedelics on grieving, relationships, culture, death about 3 years ago. And what catalyzed, my desire to explore this space and write about this topic was my first of two very profound mystical experiences. I've had several, journeys to the other side, which I write about, but two stick out as ones that really I would kind of point to as moments that like split your life in half, where there's everything before and then everything after. They're just that, meaningful. And the first of which was in 2019. So a few years prior, I had unexpectedly lost my sister, and I was on a path of trying to heal from the grief that I was experiencing. And I embarked on a lot of, traditional modalities of healing, therapy and going to the gym. I actually moved from New York and LA to just, a change of scenery. And in that winter of 2019, a friend of mine had gifted me Michael Pollan's book, How to Change Your Mind, which has now become pretty famous, rightfully so. And like many, my association with psychedelic drugs at that juncture was things you do to party when you're in college, right? Which I sure did. And that was my only association and my only experience with psychedelics. And so that book was fascinating. I think I'm someone that measures very high in openness to new experience in terms of like big five personality traits. I've always been, a thrill seeker. Wasn't nice necessarily bungee jumping, but traveling to an altered state of consciousness, spoke to me. A few months later, after reading the book, kind of serendipitously, a friend in the gym mentioned she was going to a psychedelic ceremony. I was really intrigued. I asked if I could come. Now I know these things are very inclusive, and I didn't even have to ask. I could have just tagged along, but she said, of course, and we went. And the day of the ceremony, I asked her when we arrived, like, what are we doing today? Like mushrooms? I really didn't know. She was confounded by this question and curious why I didn't read the emails. I don't read emails that well. And she said, today is the toad. And I was like, oh, shit. I knew what that meant. I knew that meant Bufo or Sapito or 5-MeO DMT. And that's, the highest level of the video game and in the psychedelic world. But I'm not one to back out. And I wasn't, I was in a lot of, pain. I still, at that juncture, it had been 5 years since I lost my sister. I still had lacked agency over the grief, where when it decided to show up, it was tough. And, I think when you are, what's the old quote, like people change when the pain of staying the same supersedes the pain of change. And I was ready to embark on anything. At that point to feel better. And I set my intention to, heal from that loss. I think I went second. I think I didn't want to go first because I didn't want to be, it was at a ceremony, there's about, 15 or 16 people. And I didn't want to go first because I didn't want to be the guinea pig, but I also knew that if I had to watch a bunch of people have these like really powerful releases, it could create trepidation on my end. So I said, all right, let's go second. And I completely transcended a lot of the typical markers of, joining the cosmic consciousness. I witnessed the Big Bang and, all these flashbacks to times in my life, some seemingly meaningless. A tour of like Paris I had done in college for some reason. I could see every face on that tour. All these just very random moments throughout my life that maybe have significance. I don't know. Stars exploding, all of that. But what was the most profound moment of that experience and of my life to this point was at some juncture, I kept feeling the word Dimitas over and over again. And it could have been rhythmic with my heartbeat. And it wasn't like hearing it. It was like feeling it almost somatically. And I had no idea what that meant. But, I came back and there's a big celebration when you kind of return to baseline consciousness. And it's this, a Bufo ceremony is really beautiful. But I was just so curious, like, what does that mean? So later on that night, I'm back at my apartment in Santa Monica, and I Googled the word Dimitas, and it's Latin for let go. And I just thought that was, it was like goosebumps. And I think this is very important to point out. I am not someone that was wired to be overly porous to new ideas and mystical experiences. I grew up in a, atheist household. Everything was science. Evidence trumps anecdote. So I'm not someone that's, woo-woo and like, oh, yeah, that makes sense. And in that moment, it just completely destabilized all these beliefs that I had up to that point, that, everything is explainable and measurable and quantifiable. And it just, it changed the trajectory of my life for sure. And, that leads me to the second most profound experience I had several years later, actually just very recently this past fall. So unfortunately, I dealt with another loss, the loss of my brother about a year ago, which was very hard because we were very, very close. And I decided to embark on a Samadhi journey as part of my healing. And I can explain what Samadhi is because I feel like it's probably not as well known.
Yeah, I'm very versed in it, but please explain.
Yeah, of course. It's interesting what psychedelics become like household names. My suspicion is like with ayahuasca, celebrities did it and talked about it, and it kind of became, in the public lexicon. But then there's things like Changa and Samadhi that still to this day live in relative obscurity. Samadhi is akin to ayahuasca. It's DMT and MAOI inhibitors. And the reason you want this combination is DMT is an incredibly ephemeral experience. If you just, smoke DMT, which I have, it's, 10, 15, 20 minutes at the most. But the MAOI inhibitors, which come from a separate plant, break down and slow down the breaking down of the DMT in the stomach, and it elongates the experience to several hours.
Wow.
Samadhi is about 5 hours. What,
It's
according to
hysterical.
some...
I was thinking Samadhi in the Vedic yogic tradition,
Yeah.
not in psychedelics. So thank you. I'm so glad
Of
you
course.
explained that.
Yeah,
Amazing.
it's actually quite fascinating. According to some local healers, I usually do the potent psychedelic journeys. I fly down to Mexico and I work with a facilitator there who's just an amazing human, and he's guided me through several of these. And one of the things that he taught me is that, because I asked him, why do these plants gift us mystical experiences? There's no evolutionary reason for this. I've been, just fascinated by that. And he told me, because the plants want to know what it feels like to be human. And it's this,
Wow.
it's this, game of like cosmic reciprocity where we go into the consciousness of the plant and it, symbiotically it goes into our consciousness and gets to feel what it's like to be us. And based on that, there is an understanding that we should actually only commune with plants in the ecosystem that we're in, which is bad news if you're running an ayahuasca, ceremony out of like Tarzana. You really should make the effort and fly down to the Amazon and commune with the plants when you're there. And Samadhi, even though it's the same exact underlying, chemicals and molecules, it's from plants cultivated in Mexico and the Northern Hemisphere. So it just seemed to be a way to kind of respect and honor the plant. So I did Samadhi. This was my second journey with Samadhi, and it was beautiful. The first one was very challenging, but this most recent one a few months back was very subtle and cathartic and euphoric, and a lot of life review, a lot of the sacred geometry. I always see Buddha. I've yet to see the machine elves or any sort of entities that are, or anything like that, but I always see Buddha, which is very fascinating. Who knows why? The attribution of this stuff is tough. But what ended up happening, two things happened overnight that were just fascinating. So you always do Samadhi at night, followed by a 24-hour fast. And it ended around 1, 2 a.m. I fell asleep. And, the next morning I pull out my phone and I had a text from a woman I briefly dated last summer, the summer before, so about a year ago, and we went on a few dates. It was nothing, meaningful, but just didn't go anywhere. And the text said, "Hey Andrew, I know this is so weird. I haven't reached out to you in about a year, but you were in my dream last night, and you looked like so calm and happy, and I just had to reach out to you." And this was just so fascinating. And what made it even more interesting was the facilitator who guided me through the journey. It's imperative you have a guide for these, really potent journeys. When I came back to baseline consciousness, the first thing he said is like, "You were so calm and happy. Like the last time you were struggling and, a lot of physiological symptoms, and he's like, I knew you were in a fight the last time. He's like, this time was just so beautiful. You were so calm." And that was so just, what are the odds of that? And we know so little about dreams and the soul and what happened, like why, it was absolutely, I was awestruck. And the other thing that was interesting, that catalyzed the memory of the dream that I had that night, after I fell asleep after the Samadhi, in which my brother called me on the phone. And, the first thing I said when I was kind of surprised, because I guess in the dream, I was still aware that he had passed. And one of the first things that I had said upon, answering the phone was like, "Oh, we can still talk." And he's like, "Yeah, of course we can." And I asked the facilitator, who's become a close friend, like, what does that mean? And he's like, "That we can absolutely communicate with the dead." And then that was him giving you permission to do that. And coming up from an atheist, background to now communicating with my deceased brother is quite the leap. But it's all been driven by experience. That's one of the things I love to write about these things, is because so much of the conversation is like people that have a textbook understanding, a neuroscientist that's read the literature, and it's like great. But you waxing, someone who just has read about consciousness, death, the afterlife, like their understanding of these, of altered states of consciousness, of mystical experience, is tantamount to my experience of what it's like to give birth, which is meaningless because I will always lack the experiential understanding to have an opinion that means anything. And, these experiences have just, changed my life. And also obviously helped me in just unbelievably powerful ways heal from, to profound losses.
Wow. That is so cool. On Samadhi, do you still have the same effects as ayahuasca, like the purging and all of that?
Yeah. Yeah, it can be very similar. Samadhi, probably because of the plant that it comes from, is known to be a little gentler and a little more of like a smooth entryway. Ayahuasca has a reputation for being a little bit harsher and a little bit like, hey, if there's some things that you need to work out in your life, it's not going to hesitate to tell you. Samadhi has a reputation for being a little bit of a smoother experience, but yeah, there's a lot of parallels in terms of length, in terms of the purging, it's just in terms of like the life review and the insights and the downloads that one gets.
Wow. How do you experience the Buddha? Is it different every time, or is it a similar essence?
Oh, it's similar. It's always like a laughing Buddha. And what's interesting about Samadhi is that I always feel like I'm in motion. And on my first one, even during the challenging one, this was very interesting too. I was flying through this world. I get a lot of, it's always like a desert for some reason. And I have Native American in my bloodline. And I also love reading about like the American West. And so I get a lot of Native American imagery. And I don't know if it's ancestral or if it's just because, I prime my brain with, reading books like Empire of the Summer Moon and Continental Reckoning. And I'm always in these like very desert type landscapes. So Buddha is a little bit out of fit there. But on my first Samadhi journey, what was very interesting was when I was flying through this like kind of synthetic desert, if I would think about someone in my life, that I loved, everything was like very smooth and beautiful. And then if I would think about someone in my life who maybe I was unsure of, a past, romantic partner, a friendship that I had that went away, the realm that I was in would start to shake violently, and then I would feel like I needed to purge. And to me, it was just so clear, like the medicine was telling me, like, these are the people in your life that you need, and these are the people that no longer serve you. It's so fascinating.
Chills. Wow, that's really cool. When you had your first Bufo experience and you saw the Big Bang and you saw there was this cosmic consciousness, I'm sure it just completely destabilized. What'd you do afterwards when you were like, okay, not everything's science?
Yeah.
How did you navigate that afterwards?
Well, I think That's a really interesting question. I think there's this part of these experiences that thousands and thousands report, which I've experienced, where you're bathed in this like feeling of love, this like cosmic just, and it's everywhere, and that feeling stays with you. And so I think it's when even though the Bufo experience is known to be only 10, 12, 13 minutes, I think the medicine is still very much with you. And so I don't think that moment of like that postmortem that you're referencing and of like, wow, like I was wrong about a lot. That doesn't come till much later because you're still in this like, high. And this is also not uncommon. And the shamans that led me through my first Bufo told me this might happen because, you're raising your energy. I had all of these serendipitous events happen within 30 days of my first Bufo. I got a promotion at work within a week that I did not deserve. I was not qualified for. I was average at that job at best. An ex-girlfriend I think we'd broken up like 6 months prior, she like showed up at my door in Santa Monica crying, wanting to rekindle the relationship. I heard from old friends, just all these like one thing, maybe, okay, coincidence is a thing in life, but multiple things, people at work saying like, you seem different. Like, I obviously couldn't tell them I smoked toad venom on Sunday, so maybe that's why. But yeah, it just raises your energy. But I think once that, and then you also have these wild dreams, like very powerful, visceral dreams for the 2 or 3 months after. But once I think all of that starts to fade and you go back to baseline, I think that's to me when I started like really like trying to research like what just happened, because that runs counter to everything I was taught growing up as a kid.
Wow. That's so cool. You started with the big one, because I haven't done that. I haven't done ayahuasca. I've stayed very baby mushrooms.
Nice.
Yeah, I haven't gone to the big guys yet. Even, I'll have sessions and I'll see. The first time I didn't even know ayahuasca much. It was years ago. I was doing a session on this girl and I saw this plant goddess come up and she was going like this and I'm like, what is this? And she goes, I am ayahuasca and I'm calling her.
Whoa.
And so then I told her afterwards and I'm like, Brianna, there's this thing, and it was saying ayahuasca was calling you. She goes, I literally just booked a ceremony for next month. And I was like, and then so I start noticing it with people in sessions, but I talked to her myself and she's like, no, not yet. And I go, why? And she goes, because you'll never come back.
Wow.
And
wow.
Which is pretty wild too. So that's just, if you could tell people like how to start, how would you, like if someone's like, I've never done this, how do I, meet and engage with this energy? Where would you recommend people starting?
Yeah, I mean, I think it would be a little bit tethered to like where they are in their own journey. I don't know if I would recommend anyone start with Bufo. That might, well, it's also like other just practical things like, if you're on SSRIs and, schizophrenia, psychosis, those people should definitely avoid, a potent psychedelic journey. You can, serotonin syndrome. A lot of people don't know this. I interviewed this woman, Victoria Wushner, her and her partner, Joelle, run an amazing 5-MeO DMT clinic down in Mexico. And I've interviewed her a few times for the blog. And she said, 5-MeO DMT, when not done in the right context, can catalyze PTSD. So that, there's all this literature we know about it, being a cure. Iboga and ayahuasca Bufo can do great things for people that have had, real trauma, but it can also create that. So I think there's a bunch of, the disclaimers about when someone's ready. But yeah, I think mushrooms are a beautiful entry point to the psychedelic realm. And now, I love microdosing. I'll do a proper hero dose, which is usually around like 4 grams, about once a year, just to kind of go in and clean out the cobwebs and, see what's down in the basement. But, mushrooms are a great entry point because while you do lose agency, they're not going to, render you completely incapable of functioning the way, Bufo, you lose motor function. There always is 2 shamans or healers present because, one has to catch you. The other is like helping you actually inhale the medicine. Both of these are happening simultaneously. So it's just incredibly, it's scary. It's there's a moment when the smoke is filling up in your lungs where you're just terrified. You know that wherever you go, you're not driving that ship. So maybe don't start there. But, mushrooms, MDMA is an interesting one. It's an empathogen, so it's not a classic psychedelic. But in terms of if, someone is saying, hey, I want to feel and I want to go into heart space, MDMA has been beautiful for me. I actually have a friend here in Austin who's a therapist who does couples therapy with MDMA. And one of the things Yeah, one of the things, the fascinating thing she told me was that the women enjoy it. Don't get me wrong, but the men enjoy it more. And she said especially men of a certain age, like over 40. I'm 41, and she struggled to identify an attribution, but I know it. We didn't grow up at a time where we spoke about our feelings. It was. I think the only thing my dad ever told me was like, be a man, shake it off. Like this was the mantra of my childhood. It wasn't like, well, I feel this way, Dad. That wouldn't have got me very far. So the ability to drop into heart space and that, analytical part of the brain and the logic part of the mind, which a lot of men, just exclusively live in, that guy takes a lunch break for 4 hours, and it's amazing. And I think with women, when two women get together, they can drop into heart space effortlessly. Whereas if I see like one of my closest guy friends that I've known for 20 years, we have to spend an hour talking about football and Bitcoin, and then maybe we'll be like, so how's your wife? But it takes us forever. And inversely, what she mentioned, in the women in this practice, they love the novelty of being able to engage with their partner who's also in heart space. Because most men, we just, we want to solve the problem. We're logic based. And so I think MDMA is it was actually being used in couples therapy in the late 70s. Therapists petitioned Ronald Reagan in the early 80s to leave it out of the war on drugs. He did not acquiesce to that. And then it got relegated to the black market, became a club drug. And now people hear MDMA, they think like, oh, raves and music. And they don't know that it is an empathogen that can really bring you into a beautiful place.
So beautiful. That's where I started. It was called sassafras, but with a shaman. But I know later, knowing these energies better, I'm like, oh, that was MDMA. It might have been some sassafras, but it brings you full into the heart, and you can go to traumas and heal those traumas without the intensity and more of a loving space. I've done so much healing on that energy. It's been incredible.
Yeah, I've told friends, like, you can think about the worst moment in your life and have a smile. And that might sound crazy to someone but that's a beautiful thing. You're kind of disassociating from this like very visceral relationship with a pain, a trauma, and you can actually just think about, the worst thing and smile and be like, that was really hard. And I mean, what a beautiful medicine that can catalyze that type of relationship with your trauma.
So beautiful. Yeah, I've done that. And even with a lot of this podcast is about twin flames. With my twin flame, a couple times on the MDMA, I've dropped into his trauma, which is really intense. And I've been able to do some energetic healing in that without being overwhelmed by kind of a demonic energy that was going on. It's been amazing. And wow. I also, when I do Akashic record readings, a lot of people are like, how do I heal with my husband? And they'll say, go do MDMA with your husband, and so that he can drop in the heart space and you can have the real conversation. So I love that there's therapists out there doing this now. It's so great. Did it get past legislation?
No.
This legislation?
Yeah, the FDA declined it. Most of it was without merit. I mean, this is the same FDA that approved OxyContin for 11-year-olds.
Right.
And so obviously I question their objectivity. I think most of it was absolutely asinine, the reasons why. And especially for the reason it was put forth wasn't for couples, although I think any way to get it legal, even therapeutically, medicinally, is a Trojan horse to then for couples. But it was actually for a very narrow use case of veterans with PTSD. And we have, 40 veterans a day killing themselves.
Oh my God.
And we send them to war. Most of these, people come from disadvantaged backgrounds. You didn't grow up in Berkeley and then go fight, right? Like you're from a socioeconomic part of the country that's struggling. You go to the military because it's one of your only options, and you come back with deep psychological wounds. And as a society, we tell them alcohol, sure, SSRIs, more the merrier. But Ibogaine, ayahuasca, MDMA, absolutely not. The only part, I read the report, the only part that had any merit was concern about impropriety between therapist and patient. And that's something that you solve for, but you don't deny veterans' use case because of like an area that we just need to figure out how to regulate.
That's wild. Yeah, that would be so helpful. I think that was one of the biggest takeaways of the show, How to Change Your Mind, of the Michael Pollan on Netflix. It was pretty cool to see people with intense trauma healing, and wow.
Yeah.
That's
and
amazing.
In terms of just the sheer chemistry of it, it was invented as, I think, in the 1913 as a way to stop blood clotting. Didn't do that. And I think it was either Bayer or Merck in Germany. It sat on the shelf for 40 years. And then this gentleman, a chemist 40 years later, saw it on the wall, thought it was an interesting, MDMA. He was like, that's an interesting combination. He tried it. I just to be like autodidactic. I can't imagine what his wife felt when he came home rolling on MDMA. This is like 1942. There's no, and he was probably just, I love you so much. And he realized like, whoa, there's something here. And then Alexander Shulgin did a bunch of work with it in the 70s. But in terms of just through the lens of what it is chemically, it's the only chemical that's ever been concocted that releases, vasopressin, oxytocin, serotonin, dopamine simultaneously. That's never, this is a miracle drug just by what it can do. In terms of like couple, I posted about MDMA, and I had a gentleman reach out who, him and his wife use it as like a tune-up. And I think that's a great kind of way to frame it, because by flooding your body with all of these chemicals, you create this cessation from inhibition, so you can share things that are real. It is, I think it's an antidote to historical jealousy, which can be, I think, an unspoken but very significant toll on relationships, where you see them for your partner in their essence, who they are now, not who they were 5 years ago. So yeah, the use cases are plentiful.
That's amazing. Do you have a favorite medicine that you take, or is it just depending on your time?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I think if I need to do some very deep healing work and just and getting that desire, that curiosity for something profound, I love Bufo. But what I learned is you really need to space it out. So after my first Bufo experience, I did it again a year after, and again a year after that. And while those two experiences were beautiful and had some insights, they were just okay. Like they were nice, beautiful experiences. And then I took 3 years off and just did Bufo again on my recent trip to Mexico this past fall, and had an equally profound experience to the first. So I think when it comes to the real potent ones, I know they say maybe once a year. I think it maybe even less, and there may be some subjectivity there for me. But I think in terms of just, I want to have like fun, I want to feel good. We are all just pleasure seekers at the end of the day. It is MDMA for me, and I think it's someone that lives in up here. It's so nice to just like, as soon as it hits me, I get this feeling of like, I'm just not gonna, like, I don't have to listen to that guy talk. And it's so nice. So yeah, that's probably my favorite.
Yeah, I remember the first time I took it, and all of a sudden this wave came over me. I was like, oh my God, this is love.
Yeah. Yeah. It's amazing.
So beautiful. I love the idea of spacing it out, because I do, what really concerns me is when clients come and they're like, oh, I've done 5 ayahuasca journeys this year. And I'm like, okay, whoa. How are you integrating? So how do you integrate between?
Yeah, I had a friend once tell me she did ayahuasca too many times, and the last time she did it, the entity said, like, don't come here anymore. Like, we've seen you enough. Like, seriously, stop. And because the spiritual seeking and it can become a real thing, and it can it can manifest into like escapism and just not wanting to be here and now, and that's not the point. So, which segues perfectly into integration, which is so paramount. I'm a huge journaler, so I just take copious notes, but I actually find the process of integration to be pretty organic for me. Like I feel differently after a potent psychedelic journey, whether it's been Changa, DMT, LSD, MDMA, a hero's journey of psilocybin. I think I just I feel differently for a few months, which is, pretty typical. And I think I try to put a lot of my awareness around like, okay, like this is part of who you are. Like this lightness that you feel, this focused ability to go through life, like, this cessation from the grief of the losses that I've experienced. Like all of those are things that I can make just a part of my day-to-day life. And I think that combined with, just journaling and writing down downloads as they come. And two beautiful things about these journeys is they catalyze the most powerful dreams. And so really making a concerted effort in the morning to write down those dreams before, I forget them. But they also surface these like long dormant memories. And that's been really good for me. When you lose people at a young age unexpectedly, you don't have like a memory bank, because you're not expecting that to happen, right? So you just kind of take, you take the relationship for granted. And so in the aftermath of these journeys, I get these just like random, and they're not, it's never like a birthday or a vacation. It's always just like some, at the time, probably innocuous, dinner at a restaurant that we had like 20 years ago, but it's like, I don't want to forget that. And so then I can write it down. And that's been a really, beautiful part of the integration process.
Oh, I love that so much. I notice that even with shadow work or trauma work, it's never the ones you think. It's all some innocuous moment that you have no idea it had such a huge effect on you.
Yeah.
Have you
Yeah.
talked to your brother since that journey that where he's like, we can still talk?
Yeah, I ask him for help, and anytime I need to make a big decision. He was an older brother, and I think one of the biggest parts of the loss was like he was just there's only you can count on one hand at any point in your life who you can go to tell you like the unsanitized like truth, who knows you and who is less worried about upsetting you and more concerned with like delivering that truth and telling you the hard things. And one of the great losses when my brother passed was like he was just such a mentor to me, and just such a person of trust in my life. And so yeah, I haven't when I meditate and I'm ruminating about what do I do with my life, or what do I go left or right, I try to think about what he would tell me to do.
I love that so much. I wonder, for some reason, I can see him coming through in some of your writing and like asking him and then channeling what he says. I feel he's could come through that way, which is
Thank you.
really great. You're welcome.
Yeah.
So good. Has the psychedelic journey helped you purge some of, like, what's your hardest psychedelic journey? Like, what's been the most challenging part of going through this, of the purging or the shadow work, or meeting the darkness within yourself? Or
I mean, it's been almost exclusively beneficial. I think the hardest part is the moments leading up to these journeys. There's still trepidation. There's still fear. I'm not immune to that. And I think, there's moments like, and this, I'm always reminded this, like when I'm at like a dinner party and I'm telling friends about, or people at the party, like, oh yeah, I went into the jungle and they bring out this, the toad venom with these two, Mexican gentlemen. Neither of them speak English, but it doesn't matter because, you're speaking energetically, and you smoke it and then you're completely incapacitated for 20 minutes. And then it's that like, point when I realize they're just like, what? Like, what are you doing? And I realize like, oh yeah, I'm living a little bit of a crazy life. Yeah, so I think there's moments in when I kind of look around. The one before my first Samadhi journey, he's like adorning the room, and you have to do like a candle and earth, the four elements. We had to go out and find like a stone outside for a rock, and it almost looks like you're preparing to die. It's like dark, and you're with this like older gentleman who's like a healer, and there's moments where I'm like, WTF, like, what am I doing right now? Like, what is happening? Why am I not just like, why can't I be normal and just go sit on the beach and have like a cocktail or something? But no. So I think those are the most challenging moments. But, I've written about this extensively, which is like, comfort kills. The brain is a relative mechanism. You just adorn it with comfort all the time, all of your needs met, which we have so much abundance in the West. Like, the brain just expects that. And that's why I think you see like, how many trust fund babies become drug addicts, because they just, every need is met, then the brain just wants more of that. And so that's the hardest part, but I also think that's a necessary. I think we need to do things that challenge us and that scare us, and look in the face of that fear and do it anyway. I think I was someone that struggled with anxiety, my whole life. I think I was someone that, never got into heart space, was just logical and analytical. And now I'm not that. I think anyone that knows me now just sees this, a completely just different person, or maybe who I was as a child, right? Like my essence has returned. So almost exclusively positive.
that's so beautiful, and it completely changed your life around, right?
Oh yeah.
I assume.
Yeah, and I mean, and the people you bring into your life when you're operating at a higher frequency, or just, in New York, I lived in New York for 12 years. I was drinking heavy, the typical work hard, play hard, and these were nice people, but also people that were just, we got together to self-destruct.
Yeah.
That's what we shared. And now I have, cultivated relationships with just people that are spiritual and living good lives and grounded and doing interesting things. And it's such a better way to live, for sure.
I love that. Do you ever think you're going to facilitate it? Is that something you want to do?
Yeah, I've never actually thought about that. I'd be open to that. I think at some point, I think I don't know where I am in my journey, but I'm still seeking. I'm still curious. There's still some things I want to do. Also, I know the vision quest that a lot of the healers do. That terrifies me, but maybe that's a good thing. 4 days in the mountains, no food.
Yeah. I've always thought about that too, but it terrifies me as well.
It terrifies me. The healer who I work with, his vision quest, the story. I mean, it was just the most amazing things happen. And this is not a gentleman that has any sort of ability to fabricate. Like he said, about five, I'll share one. He said, five things happen. None of these things make any sense without, the spiritual realm playing a role. But he's like, I don't even like tomatoes. He's like, but all 4 days, once the hunger started, all I thought about was tomatoes. So I couldn't get them out of my mind. When his mentor, the healer, picked him up at the bottom of the mountain, he handed him a tomato. And he was like, "What? How did you know?" He's like, there was selling tomatoes on the side of the street. I knew you'd be hungry. You need some vegetable." And it's just like these things that happen are just so crazy. So yeah, maybe I go all in one day and do a vision quest, but not quite
Yeah.
yet.
I just love how you've gone all in and you write about it and you're so knowledgeable about it and you do the mental stuff as well as the heart stuff. Like really what this means. That's what I love about your blog of going in on the Jungian psychology and all of the psychology and the intellect behind it feels really grounded to me.
Oh wow, that's
Yeah.
very yeah. Thank you so much. That's
You're
humbling.
welcome. So good. So for our last question, what would you recommend someone that just is like, I'm kind of nervous about this. How do I go about this? Do you have any recommendation that you wish you would have known before you went to your first Bufo ceremony?
I think I benefited by not knowing because I might have talked myself, at that point, this is before spiritual Andrew, right? So like that guy, if I had known too much, I might have, used, intellectualized the process to like,
Yeah.
talk myself out of it. Yeah, it would be tough for me to prescribe like the way to go about it without diagnosing that person, right? It almost feels
Right.
like malpractice to like, but I think if someone is, if they adhere to the baseline criterion, they're not on medicines and all that. I think if you are ruminating about it, if you're curious about it, for whatever reason, you're in a professional rut, your marriage, is on the rocks, you've lost someone that you love. If you're curious about it, explore. I think the beautiful thing is we're in a time now where there's like a plethora of content online, not just my blog, but other things. There's no shortage of resources where you can kind of go and do your own homework and research. But if you're thinking about it, that's probably a sign that maybe, it is time. And yeah, I'm reticent to prescribe, but I'm also, I know I can't imagine the counterfactual of what my life would look like had I not went down this path. Like I haven't had a drink in 6 years. I have better people in my life. I eat clean. One of the unintended consequences or benefits of psychedelic use is like embodiment, where I think about what I eat. I train hard 6 days. It's just all of these changes, all because I had the courage to do that. And so I think if someone is thinking about it, do your homework, do it safely, have a guide, follow all the parameters, and be conservative in how you execute. I mean, yeah, we're here for a very short amount of time, and I think if you can embark on a modality that brings in a lot of joy and clarity and healing into your life, it might be worth doing it.
Yeah, I agree. So good. Thank you
Yeah.
so much. This has been so fantastic. And yeah, I hope to have you on again. If people have questions as well, can they reach out to you on your Substack if they have some questions for
Yeah,
you?
the psychedelic blog. Thank you so much, by the way. I love this conversation, and yeah, I
You're welcome.
try to my best to respond to every comment that I get. So yeah, the blog is pretty interactive in that regard.
Amazing. Thank
Yeah,
you so much.
thank you.
Thank you for watching Beyond the Veil. Please like, subscribe, and share so we can grow our channel. If you have a story you would like to share, please email nandipresents@gmail.com. If you're interested in classes or personal sessions, please visit nandi.co, Nandi.co, and have a magical day.